My daughter kicked me out when she inherited my house, but she didn't know about the second property. The spring rain washed down the window pane in steady rivulets, blurring the view of my garden outside. In the 40 years I'd lived in this house, I'd planted every shrub, every rosebush, every perennial with my own hands. The garden had been my sanctuary after Harold died, the place where I could feel closest to him. We had dreamed of retirement here, of growing old surrounded by the fragrance of lilacs and the brilliant colors of tulips in springtime. I sighed, my arthritis-riddled fingers curling around my teacup. The warmth seeped into my joints, offering momentary relief. At 72, I had come to accept the limitations of my body, the way my knees protested each morning, the stiffness in my hands. But I refused to give in to the melancholy that often threatened to engulf me on days like this. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 3 times, reminding me that Rebecca would be arriving soon. My daughter had been adamant about our weekly Sunday visits since Harold's passing 8 years ago. I appreciated the routine, even if our relationship had grown increasingly strained. Rebecca was my only child, born after years of trying. Harold. And I had all but given up hope when, at 37, I discovered I was pregnant. She had been our miracle, our greatest joy. I had poured everything into being her mother, perhaps too much, as Harold sometimes gently suggested. But I couldn't help it. From the moment the nurse placed her in my arms, I knew I would do anything for her. As if summoned by my thoughts, the doorbell rang. I made my way slowly to the front door, my cane tapping against the hardwood floors Harold had installed himself. "Just a moment," I called, my voice betraying none of the pain that shot through my hip with each step. When I opened the door, Rebecca stood there, her sleek black umbrella shielding her from the rain. At 43, my daughter was stunning, tall, and slender with Harold's deep-set blue eyes and my auburn hair, though hers was highlighted with expensive blonde streaks that caught the light even on this dreary day. "Hi, Mom," she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. Her perfume enveloped me, something expensive and French. "You shouldn't be answering the door yourself. You could fall." And so it began. The subtle criticism, the implication that I was no longer capable of managing on my own. I bit back the retort that sprang to my lips and smiled instead. "I'm perfectly fine, Rebecca. Come in out of the rain." She followed me into the living room, her sharp gaze taking in the stack of mail on the side, table, the light layer of dust on the bookshelves. "The place is looking a bit neglected, Mom. Have you thought more about what we discussed?" By what we discussed, she meant the assisted living facility brochures she had left during her last visit. Sunshine Meadows, with its cheerful name, and photographs of silver-haired residents engaged in watercolor classes and Tai Chi. "I'm not ready for that yet," I said firmly, lowering myself into my favorite armchair. "Mrs. Abernathy comes twice a week to help with the heavy cleaning, and I'm managing just fine with everything else." Rebecca pursed her lips. "You're being stubborn. This house is too big for you now. The stairs are dangerous and the garden is becoming overgrown. What happens if you fall when no one is here?" "I have my alert button," I said, patting the device that hung around my neck. "And I'm careful." "It's not just about being careful," Rebecca insisted. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her posture rigid. She never fully relaxed in my presence anymore, always perched as if ready to fly away at the first opportunity. "It's about being practical. This house is an asset that's just sitting here, depreciating because you can't maintain it properly." There it was. The real reason behind her concern. The house. My home. The property that had appreciated significantly over the decades in our desirable neighborhood. Harold and I had purchased it for a song in the late 1970s, when the area was still up and coming. Now similar homes on our street sold for well over $1 million. "I'm not ready to leave," I repeated. "This is my home, Rebecca. Your father and I built our lives here." "Dad's been gone for 8 years, she said, her voice softening slightly. He wouldn't want you rattling around in this big place by yourself, struggling to keep it up. The mention of Harold sent a familiar pang through my heart. Would he want me to leave? Perhaps. He had always been practical, forward-thinking. But he had also understood my deep connection to this place, to the memories embedded in every corner. "Let's not argue today," I said, changing the subject. "Tell me about your work. How's the new position going?" Rebecca was a marketing executive for a large pharmaceutical company. She had recently received a promotion that came with a substantial raise and increased responsibilities. She loved talking about her career achievements, and I genuinely enjoyed hearing about them, proud of her determination and intelligence. As she launched into an explanation of her latest project, I studied her face. Beneath the polished exterior, I could see the signs of stress, the faint lines between her brows, the slight tightness around her mouth. Rebecca had always driven herself relentlessly, setting impossibly high standards. It was a quality I had inadvertently encouraged, my own perfectionism reflected back at me through my daughter. "That sounds fascinating," I said when she finished. "You've always had such a good head for strategy." She smiled, the first genuine smile since she'd arrived. "Thanks, Mom. It's challenging, but I'm enjoying it." Her expression turned serious again. "But it's also demanding. I worry about you here alone while I'm working such long hours." "I'm not alone," I countered. "I have friends. The book club meets every Wednesday. I have lunch with Martha and Louise twice a month. And I've been volunteering at the library, on Thursdays." "That's not the same as having someone here with you," Rebecca argued. "What about that nice one-bedroom at Sunshine Meadows? It overlooks the garden, and there would be people around all the time. You could make new friends." I sighed. "Rebecca, please. I've made my decision. I'm staying here." She opened her mouth to continue the debate, but something in my expression must have warned her not to push further. Instead, she reached into her designer bag and pulled out a folder. "Fine, but at least look at these papers. It's the living will and power of attorney documents we discussed. If you insist on staying here, we need to have legal protections in place in case something happens." I took the folder reluctantly. Harold had been the one who handled our legal affairs, consulting with our attorney, James Peterson, on all important matters. After his death, I had maintained the relationship with James. But Rebecca had been pushing for me to update my will and other documents for months. "I'll look them over," I promised, setting the folder aside. "No, Mom. Please read them now while I'm here to explain anything you don't understand." The condescension in her tone irritated me, but I bit my tongue. For peace, I opened the folder and began to scan the documents. Most of it was straightforward. The power of attorney would give Rebecca legal authority to make decisions on my behalf if I became incapacitated. The living will outlined my wishes, regarding medical treatment in case I couldn't communicate them myself. But as I flipped through the will itself, something caught my eye. A clause stating that upon my death, all my property, specifically including my house, would pass directly to Rebecca. This wasn't unusual or unexpected. She was my only child and natural heir. What gave me pause was the additional stipulation that in the event I needed long-term care, the house could be sold to pay for those expenses, with Rebecca maintaining control of the proceeds. "Rebecca," I said slowly, "this clause about selling the house." "It's standard, Mom," she interrupted. "If you need to go into a facility eventually, the house would need to be sold anyway. This just makes it cleaner, legally speaking." I wasn't so sure about that. James had never mentioned such an arrangement as standard. I closed the folder. "I'd like to have James look these over before I sign anything." Rebecca's face flushed. "I had these drawn up by the corporate attorneys at my company as a favor. They're perfectly legitimate." "I'm sure they are," I said carefully, "but I'd still prefer to have James review them. He's been our family attorney for decades." James is practically retired, Rebecca said dismissively. His knowledge of current estate law is probably outdated. The conversation was veering into uncomfortable territory. I placed the folder on the side table with a deliberate gesture of finality. I'll make an appointment to see him this week. Rebecca's jaw tightened, but she nodded stiffly. Fine. Have it your way. She glanced at her watch. I should get going. I have some work to finish before tomorrow. Our visit had lasted less than an hour. I tried not to show my disappointment as I slowly stood to walk her to the door. So soon? I thought we might have tea. Another time, she said, already gathering her things. I'll call you tomorrow to check in. At the door, she gave me another, perfunctory kiss on the cheek. Think about what I said, Mom. About Sunshine Meadows. They have a waiting list, you know. We should get your name on it even if you're not ready to move right away. I'll think about it, I lied, knowing it was the easiest way to end the conversation. After she left, I returned to my chair by the window, watching as she hurried to her luxury SUV parked in the driveway. She didn't look back at the house as she drove away. The rain had stopped, and weak sunlight was beginning to break through the clouds. I should have felt relieved by Rebecca's departure. Our visits often left me drained and slightly sad, but instead, I felt a growing sense of unease. The documents in that folder troubled me. Not just the content, but the fact that Rebecca had had them prepared without consulting me or James. It spoke of an agenda she wasn't fully sharing with me. I picked up the phone and dialed James's number. His wife, Eleanor, answered. Martha, how lovely to hear from you, she said warmly. Eleanor and I had been friends since our children were in elementary school together. Hello, Eleanor. Is James available? I need to schedule an appointment to see him. Of course. He's puttering in the garden right now, but I know he'd be happy to see you. Everything all right? Just some paperwork I need his advice on, I said vaguely. He's in the office Tuesday and Thursday mornings this month. Semi-retirement, she explained with a chuckle. Shall I put you down for Tuesday at 10? That would be perfect. Thank you. After hanging up, I sat for a long time, thinking. The house had become a point of contention between Rebecca and me, but it was more than just a valuable asset. It was the repository of my life with Harold, the place where we had raised our daughter, celebrated holidays, weathered storms both literal and metaphorical. But there was something else, too. Something I had never told Rebecca. Something Harold, and I had agreed would remain our secret until the time was right. I rose and made my way to Harold's study, a room I rarely entered now. It still held his presence so strongly that it sometimes hurt to be surrounded by his things. The leather-bound books on the shelves, the antique desk he had lovingly restored, the faint scent of his pipe tobacco that somehow lingered even after all these years. From the desk drawer, I retrieved a small key. Then I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out a weathered copy of The Great Gatsby, Harold's favorite novel. Behind it was a small wall safe, concealed by the books on either side. I unlocked it, with fingers that trembled slightly, and removed a sealed envelope. On the front, in Harold's distinctive handwriting, was written, For Rebecca, when the time comes. Inside was the deed to our second property, a small but charming cottage on the Maine coast that we had purchased 20 years ago as a vacation home and potential retirement nest egg. We had bought it through a trust, a complicated legal arrangement that James had set up for tax purposes. Rebecca knew nothing about it. We had always vacationed there when she was away at summer camp, or, later, traveling with friends during college breaks. Harold and I had planned to surprise her with it someday, perhaps when she married or had children of her own. But her marriage to Stephen had ended in a bitter divorce after just 3 years, and she had never had children, throwing herself instead into her career with single-minded focus. After Harold's death, I had considered telling her about the cottage many times, but something always held me back. Perhaps it was the increasingly calculating look in her eyes when she spoke of my house, or the way she had begun to treat me as incompetent rather than merely aging. I returned the envelope to the safe, locked it, and replaced the book. The cottage would remain my secret for now, my insurance policy against an uncertain future. If Rebecca's intentions toward me were as loving and concerned as she claimed, she never needed to know about it. But if they weren't, well, then the cottage might become my sanctuary in more ways than one. Chapter 2. Silent Currents. Tuesday morning dawned bright and clear, a welcome change from Sunday's gloom. I dressed, with particular care for my meeting with James, choosing a tailored navy pantsuit that Harold had always complimented. "You look like Katharine Hepburn in that," he would say, his eyes crinkling at the corners. The memory made me smile as I fastened a simple strand of pearls around my neck. I still took pride in my appearance, though Rebecca sometimes made comments about my outdated style. What she called outdated, I preferred to think of as classic. I called a taxi to take me downtown to James's office. I could still drive, but city traffic made me nervous these days, and parking was always a nightmare. The taxi driver was chatty, filling the journey with observations about the weather and local politics. I responded politely, but my mind was occupied with what I would say to James. His office was in one of the older buildings downtown, a dignified brick structure with gleaming brass fixtures. The elevator creaked slightly as it carried me to the third floor. James's practice had downsized considerably since his semi-retirement. Now he occupied just a small suite instead of the entire floor as he once had. His secretary, a woman about my age whom I recognized from previous visits, greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Carlton, lovely to see you. Mr. Peterson is expecting you. Go right in." James rose from behind his desk as I entered, coming around to grasp both my hands in his. At 78, he was still robust, though his once dark hair was now completely silver. He had been Harold's friend since law school, and his presence always brought a bittersweet comfort. "Martha, you're looking well," he said, guiding me to a comfortable chair opposite his desk. "Eleanor sends her love and wants you to come for dinner soon." "I'd like that," I said sincerely. "It's been too long." He settled back in his chair. "Now what can I help you with today? Eleanor mentioned some paperwork?" I opened my handbag and withdrew Rebecca's folder. Rebecca brought these documents for me to sign on Sunday. She had them prepared by attorneys at her company. James raised an eyebrow but said nothing as he accepted the folder and began to review its contents. I watched his expression carefully, noting the slight frown that appeared as he read through the pages. After several minutes, he looked up. "These are fairly standard estate planning documents on the surface," he said carefully, "but there are several clauses that concern me." "The one about selling the house?" I asked. He nodded. "That's one issue. This gives Rebecca extraordinary power to liquidate your assets, specifically your home, even while you're still alive, if she deems it necessary for your care. There's very little protection for your wishes in the matter." He flipped to another page. "And this clause here essentially bypasses the normal probate process, transferring the house directly to her upon your death through what's called a transfer on death deed. Again, not inherently problematic, but combined with these other provisions." He trailed off, his frown deepening. "What is it, James?" I prompted. He sighed. "Martha, forgive my bluntness, but these documents appear designed to give Rebecca complete control over your primary asset, your home, with minimal oversight. If you were to sign these as written, she could potentially force a sale of your house against your wishes by claiming it's for your benefit." A chill ran through me. I had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed by James made it real in a way my suspicions hadn't been. "What about the cottage?" I asked quietly. "Is it protected?" James's expression softened. "The main property is secure. The trust we established is ironclad, and since Rebecca doesn't know about it, she couldn't specifically target it. but I'm concerned about why she's suddenly so interested in controlling your assets. I shared my recent conversations with Rebecca about Sunshine Meadows and her increasing insistence that I couldn't manage on my own. She's been different since her divorce, I concluded. More calculating, less patient. I understand she worries, but sometimes it feels like there's something else driving her. James nodded thoughtfully. The divorce hit her hard financially, from what Harold told me before he passed. Stephen's family had significant resources, and she became accustomed to a certain lifestyle. This was news to me. Rebecca had never discussed the financial aspects of her divorce, and I had respected her privacy by not prying. She seems to be doing well now, I offered. The new promotion came with a substantial raise. Perhaps, James said, but appearances can be deceiving. Many people in high-profile positions live beyond their means to maintain the image expected of them. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Martha, I'm going to prepare alternative documents for you. Ones that will protect your interests while still providing for Rebecca appropriately. But I want you to be cautious. Don't sign anything she brings you without consulting me first. I won't, I promised. And James, I've been thinking it might be time to tell Rebecca about the cottage, to see how she reacts. He considered this. That's your decision, of course. The property is fully paid for and has been for years. The taxes and maintenance costs are covered by the rental income when you're not using it. There's no financial reason she needs to know about it. It's not about the financial aspect, I explained. It's about trust. Harold and I always intended to tell her eventually. Maybe knowing there's another property would ease her fixation on the house. Or intensify it, James countered gently. Martha, I don't want to speak ill of Rebecca. She's your daughter, and I've known her since she was a child. But people change, and the Rebecca I've glimpsed in recent years seems hardened somehow. Less like the idealistic young woman she once was. I couldn't disagree. The change had been gradual but undeniable. The ambitious but warm-hearted daughter who used to bring me wildflowers and handmade cards had transformed into someone more distant, more focused on material success than emotional connection. What would you advise? I asked, trusting his judgment as Harold always had. James thought for a moment. Keep the cottage in reserve for now. Let's see how Rebecca responds to the revised documents I'll prepare. Her reaction might tell us a great deal about her current mindset. I nodded, relieved to have his guidance. When will the new documents be ready? I'll have them for you by the end of the week, he promised. In the meantime, if Rebecca presses you to sign what she's already prepared, tell her you're having them reviewed by your financial advisor. I don't have a financial advisor, I pointed out. James smiled. She doesn't need to know that. The point is to buy time without creating unnecessary conflict. As I prepared to leave, James helped me with my coat, his manner solicitous, but not condescending as Rebecca's often was. Martha, he said hesitantly, there's something else I should mention. I turned to face him. What is it? I had lunch with George Bennett last week. He mentioned that Sunshine Meadows has approached him about potentially purchasing several properties in your neighborhood for expansion. George Bennett was a prominent real estate developer in our city, known for acquiring older homes in established neighborhoods and replacing them with luxury condominiums or upscale commercial spaces. My neighborhood? I repeated, confused. But Sunshine Meadows is on the other side of town. Apparently, they're looking to establish a second location, one that would cater to a more affluent clientele. James's expression was troubled. Your street would be ideal from their perspective. Centrally located, large lots, older homes that might be ripe for sale as owners age. A disturbing thought occurred to me. Rebecca's pharmaceutical company, they don't have any connection to Sunshine Meadows, do they? James shook his head. Not that I'm aware of, but I can look into it if you'd like. Please do, I said, my unease growing. It seems like too much of a coincidence. On the taxi ride home, I gazed out at the familiar streets of the city where I'd spent most of my adult life. Harold and I had chosen our neighborhood carefully, drawn to its tree-lined streets and sense of community. Over the years, we had watched as young families moved in, raised children, and eventually gave way to a new generation. Some of our original neighbors remained, creating a blend of old and new that kept the area vibrant. The thought of sunshine, Meadows purchasing homes on our street, perhaps eventually targeting mine, filled me with a quiet anger. It wasn't just about my attachment to the house. It was about the deliberate dismantling of a community in the name of profit. And if Rebecca was somehow involved, if her insistence that I move to Sunshine Meadows was connected to their expansion plans, that would be a betrayal I wasn't sure I could forgive. Back at home, I made myself a cup of tea and carried it out to the garden. The spring flowers were in full bloom, daffodils nodding in the gentle breeze, tulips standing proud in their vibrant colors. Harold had helped me plant many of these, perennials, his strong hands working alongside mine in the rich soil. "What would you do, Harold?" I murmured, settling onto the wooden bench he had built. "How would you handle this situation with our daughter?" No answer came, of course, but sitting in the garden he had loved always helped clarify my thoughts. Harold had been the diplomatic one in our marriage, the peacemaker who could smooth over conflicts with gentle humor and wisdom. I tended to be more direct, sometimes to my detriment. In this case, I decided a blend of our approaches might work best. I would be cautious and strategic, as James advised, but I would also create an opportunity for honest conversation with Rebecca. If there was an explanation for her behavior beyond simple concern for my welfare, I wanted to give her the chance to share it. I was still sitting in the garden when my phone rang. Rebecca's name flashed on the screen. "Hello, dear," I answered, keeping my tone light. "Mom, I've been thinking about those papers," she said without preamble. "Have you signed them yet?" "I've given them to my financial advisor to review," I said, following James's suggestion. "He'll get back to me by the end of the week." "Financial advisor?" Rebecca sounded surprised. "Since when do you have a financial advisor?" "Since your father died," I improvised. "James recommended him. He's been very helpful." There was a pause, and I could almost hear Rebecca recalibrating. "Well, that's good. But these documents are fairly straightforward. I'm not sure why you need financial advice on them." "Better safe than sorry," I said cheerfully. "How's your week going? Making progress on that big project you mentioned?" The change of subject worked. Rebecca launched into a detailed account of her latest work challenge, and I made appropriate noises of interest and sympathy. By the time we hung up, the tension had dissipated, at least for the moment. But as I continued to sit in my garden, watching the shadows lengthen as afternoon gave way to evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was engaged in a chess match I hadn't agreed to play. Each move had consequences I couldn't fully anticipate, and the stakes felt unexpectedly high. That night, I dreamed of the cottage in Maine. In my dream, I was sitting on its small porch, looking out at the ocean. Harold was there, his arm around my shoulders, solid and warm as he had been in life. "Remember our promise," he said in the dream, his voice as clear as if he were really beside me. I woke with tears on my cheeks but a sense of resolve in my heart. Harold and I had promised each other to always protect what mattered most. Not just our material possessions, but our values, our integrity, our capacity for love even in difficult circumstances. Whatever was motivating Rebecca's recent behavior, I would face it with that promise in mind. And I would protect not only myself, but also the daughter I still loved deeply, even if I no longer fully understood her. Chapter 3. The Paper Trail. The rest of the week passed uneventfully. I kept busy with my usual activities, volunteering at the library, attending my book club, tending to my garden. If I was more preoccupied than usual, My friends were kind enough not to comment. On Friday afternoon, James's secretary called to let me know the revised documents were ready. "Mr. Peterson asked if you could come in Monday morning," she said. "He has some additional information to discuss with you." "Additional information?" I repeated. "About what?" "He didn't specify, Mrs. Carlton, just that it was important." My curiosity was piqued, but I would have to wait until Monday for answers. In the meantime, I had Rebecca's weekly Sunday visit to navigate. She arrived promptly at 3, as usual, this time bearing a small potted orchid. "For your windowsill," she said, placing it on the coffee table. "I remembered how much you love them." I did love orchids, though I hadn't mentioned this to Rebecca in years. The thoughtful gesture touched me and momentarily eased some of my suspicions. Perhaps I was overreacting to the legal documents, seeing shadows where there were none. "Thank you, it's beautiful," I said sincerely, admiring the delicate white blooms. "Would you like some tea?" "I baked scones this morning." "Tea would be nice," she agreed, following me to the kitchen. "But no scones for me. I'm trying to cut back on carbs." As I prepared the tea, Rebecca leaned against the counter, her expression casual. "So, did your financial advisor have a chance to look over those papers?" And there it was, the real reason for the orchid and the softer approach today. I kept my back to her as I arranged scones on a plate for myself, using the moment to compose my thoughts. "He's still reviewing them," I said finally, "along with James Peterson. I should have their feedback next week." Rebecca's voice took on an edge. "Mom, I told you those documents were prepared by top-notch corporate attorneys. This delay is unnecessary." I turned to face her, teapot in hand. "It's not a delay, Rebecca. It's due diligence. Your father always taught me never to sign legal papers without proper review." She opened her mouth as if to argue, then seemed to think better of it. "Fine. But I hope this will be resolved soon. It's important to have these protections in place." "I agree," I said mildly, carrying the tea tray to the living room. "Proper legal protections are essential. That's why I'm being thorough." We settled into an uneasy truce as we sipped our tea. Rebecca shared stories from work, and I told her about the latest book my club was reading. On the surface, it was a pleasant mother-daughter visit, but underneath ran currents of tension and unspoken questions. When she rose to leave earlier than usual, I decided to test the waters. "By the way," I said casually, "I ran into Elaine Thompson at the grocery store yesterday. She mentioned that Sunshine Meadows might be looking to expand into our neighborhood. Did you know anything about that?" Rebecca froze momentarily, then continued gathering her purse and jacket. "I hadn't heard that specifically," she said, not meeting my eyes. "But it makes sense. This area is centrally located and attractive to seniors who want to maintain their lifestyle." I responded, non-committally. "It would be a shame to see these beautiful old homes torn down for an institutional facility, regardless of how luxurious it might be." "Progress is inevitable, Mom," Rebecca said, her tone suddenly brisk and businesslike. "Property values here are stagnating because younger families want newer homes with modern amenities. Selling to a commercial developer might be the best financial option for many homeowners on this street." "Including me?" I asked quietly. Rebecca finally met my gaze. "Eventually, yes. It's simple economics, but that's a conversation for another day." She leaned down to kiss my cheek. "I'll call during the week to check in. Let me know as soon as those documents are ready to sign." After she left, I sat for a long time, turning our conversation over in my mind. Rebecca hadn't exactly confirmed a connection to Sunshine Meadows' expansion plans, but her reaction and knowledge about the situation suggested more involvement than she was admitting. Monday couldn't come soon enough. When I arrived at James's office, he greeted me with unusual solemnity. "Martha, thank you for coming. Please, sit down." Something in his manner made my heart beat faster. "What is it, James? What have you found out?" He placed a folder on the desk between us. First, the revised documents are here for your review. They provide the essential protections you need without giving Rebecca undue control over your assets. I've highlighted the key differences. I glanced at the papers but was more interested in whatever had prompted his serious demeanor. And the other matter? Your secretary mentioned additional information. James sighed heavily. I did some digging, as you requested, into any potential connection between Rebecca's company, Meridian Pharmaceuticals, and Sunshine Meadows. He opened another folder and pushed it toward me. There's no direct corporate relationship. Sunshine Meadows is owned by a healthcare conglomerate called Vitality Senior Living. However, last year, Meridian Pharmaceuticals entered into an exclusive provider agreement with Vitality for all of their facilities nationwide. I frowned, trying to understand the implications. So Rebecca's company supplies medications to Sunshine Meadows? Yes, but it's more significant than that. The contract is worth millions annually and represents Meridian's largest single client relationship. James tapped a document in the folder. This is public information from their annual report. The Vitality contract is specifically highlighted as a major growth driver. I still don't see... I began, but James wasn't finished. There's more. I spoke with a former colleague who now works in corporate law. He confirmed that Meridian's executive compensation structure includes significant bonuses tied to the expansion of the Vitality relationship. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. So, if Sunshine Meadows expands into new locations, Rebecca and other executives stand to benefit substantially, James confirmed grimly. And based on property records I've reviewed, they've already purchased 3 homes on your street in the past 6 months, through a shell company that traces back to Vitality. I felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. Which homes? The Hendersons' place. They moved to Arizona last fall. The old Wilson property that had been vacant since Mrs. Wilson passed away. And just last month, the Cooper's house on the corner. All older residents who had either died or moved away to be closer to family. All properties that had sold quickly and quietly, without the usual for sale signs and open houses. And my house would be particularly valuable because it's larger than most and sits on a double lot, I said, connecting the final dot. James nodded. Prime real estate for their purposes. With those 4 properties combined, they would have enough contiguous land to build a substantial facility. I sat back, trying to absorb this revelation. So Rebecca's insistence that I move to Sunshine Meadows, her push for me to sell the house, it's all connected to her financial interests. It appears that way, James said gently. I'm sorry, Martha. I know this must be painful to consider. Painful didn't begin to describe it. The betrayal cut deep, more hurtful than I could have imagined. Not just the deception, but the calculation behind it. The way my own daughter had been treating me as an obstacle to her financial gain rather than a person with valid desires and autonomy. What do I do now? I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. James leaned forward. First, sign these revised documents. They'll protect you legally. Second, consider your options carefully. You're under no obligation to sell your home or move anywhere you don't want to go. And Rebecca? What do I say to her? He hesitated. That's a personal decision. You could confront her with what we've discovered, but be prepared for denial or rationalization. Or you could keep this knowledge to yourself for now, while maintaining your boundaries firmly. I thought of the cottage in Maine, my secret insurance, policy that had suddenly become much more significant. I think it's time to tell her about the second property, I said slowly. To see how she reacts. That might tell me everything I need to know about her true motivations. James didn't argue, though I could tell he had reservations. If that's what you want to do, I'll support you. But remember, once that information is shared, it can't be taken back. I understand, I said, straightening my shoulders. But I need to know where my daughter's heart truly. I'll continue the story from where we left off, adding more chapters to reach the requested length. I understand, I said, straightening my shoulders. But I need to know where my daughter's heart truly lies. If she's only interested in my property as a business asset, then I need to face that reality, painful as it may be. James nodded solemnly. I've known you and Harold for decades, Martha. You both raised Rebecca with love and strong values. Perhaps there's more to her actions than we're seeing right now. I hope so, I whispered, though the evidence suggested otherwise. I signed the revised documents James had prepared, feeling a mixture of sadness and resolve. As he walked me to the door, James placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. Call me anytime, Martha, day or night, and remember, you're not alone in this. His kindness nearly broke my composure. I managed a tight smile before hurrying to the waiting taxi, not wanting to break down in his office. Chapter 4. The Revelation. That evening, I called Rebecca and asked her to come for dinner the following night. There's something important I need to discuss with you, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. Is everything all right? She asked, and I could hear the immediate calculation in her tone, worry mixed with something else. Everything's fine. Just some family matters I'd like to talk about in person. She agreed to come at 6, and I spent the next day preparing. I made her favorite meal, pot roast with roasted root vegetables, the comfort food she had loved since childhood. I set the dining room table with Harold's grandmother's china and polished silver, something I rarely bothered with anymore. Not because I wanted to create a false sense of occasion, but because I wanted to remind Rebecca of our family history, of the values and traditions Harold and I had tried to instill. I also retrieved the envelope from Harold's safe, placing it in my desk drawer where I could easily access it during our conversation. Rebecca arrived precisely at 6, bringing an expensive bottle of red wine. You sounded serious on the phone, she said, handing me the wine as she entered. I thought we might need this. Thank you, I said, accepting the bottle. It might come in handy. Her eyes narrowed slightly at my tone, but she followed me to the dining room without comment. As we settled in to eat, we made small talk about the weather, her work, my book club, safe topics that required no emotional investment. When we had finished the main course, I cleared the plates and brought out apple pie for dessert, another childhood favorite of hers. As I served the pie, Rebecca finally broached the subject that had been hovering between us. So, Mom, what's this important family matter you wanted to discuss? Is it about those documents? Because I spoke with the attorneys again, and they assured me everything is standard practice. I took a deep breath. I've signed different documents, Rebecca. Ones prepared by James Peterson that provide the protections I need without giving away control of my assets. Her fork clattered against the plate. What? Why would you do that without discussing it with me first? Because they're my assets to control, I said calmly. And because I've learned some troubling information about Sunshine Meadows and its connection to your company. Rebecca's face flushed, then paled. What are you talking about? I know about Meridian's contract with Vitality Senior Living. I know about the bonus structure tied to expanding that relationship. And I know about the 3 properties on this street that have already been purchased through a shell company. She stared at me, her expression a mixture of shock and calculation. I could almost see her mind racing, trying to decide how to respond. Who told you this? She finally asked. Does it matter? Is it true? Rebecca pushed her dessert away untouched. It's complicated, Mom. Yes, Meridian has a business relationship with Vitality, which owns Sunshine Meadows. And yes, there are performance incentives tied to that relationship. But that has nothing to do with my concern for you. Doesn't it? I challenged gently. You never mentioned this connection when urging me to move to Sunshine Meadows. You never disclosed that you stand to gain financially from their expansion. That's not fair, she protested, but her eyes shifted away from mine. My professional relationships and your living situation are separate issues. Are they? Then why the sudden urgency about selling this house? Why the documents that would give you control over the property even while I'm still alive? Rebecca's face hardened. Because you're being stubborn and impractical. Because this neighborhood is changing, and this house will only decrease in value over time. Because holding on to it out of sentimentality is financially irresponsible. And your company's expansion plans for this street have nothing to do with your concern about my financial welfare? She stood abruptly, tossing her napkin onto the table. You make it sound so calculated, so cold. I'm trying to help you secure your future while making a smart business decision. What's wrong with that? What's wrong is the deception, I said quietly. What's wrong is treating me like an obstacle rather than your mother. What's wrong is putting profits before people, before family. Rebecca began pacing, her agitation visible. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The divorce left me with almost nothing. Stephen's family made sure of that. Do you know how hard I've had to work to rebuild? This Vitality deal could secure my financial future, set me up for the rest of my career. And my home is just collateral damage in that plan. She stopped pacing and faced me, her expression suddenly vulnerable. I didn't see it that way. I truly believe Sunshine Meadows would be better for you, safer, more appropriate at your age. Even if that were true, I said, it should be my choice, made freely with all the information, not manipulated through half-truths and legal maneuvers. Rebecca sank back into her chair, looking suddenly exhausted. I never meant to hurt you. It seemed like a solution that would benefit everyone. Everyone except me, I pointed out. I don't want to leave my home, Rebecca. I've made that clear repeatedly, but you weren't listening. She looked away, a mixture of shame and defensiveness on her face. So what now? You've signed different papers. You're staying put. Is that why you wanted me to come tonight? To tell me my efforts have failed? No, I said, rising from the table. There's something else you need to know. Something your father and I kept from you for many years. I went to my desk and retrieved the envelope, then placed it in front of her. Open it, I instructed. Rebecca looked at the envelope with suspicion, but did as I asked. Her eyes widened as she pulled out the deed and accompanying documents. What is this? She asked, though I could see comprehension dawning in her expression. The deed to a cottage in Maine. Your father and I purchased it 20 years ago as a vacation home and retirement investment. It's fully paid for, maintained by a property management company, and generates rental income when we're not using it. She stared at the papers, then at me. You've had another property all this time, and never told me? We were waiting for the right time, I explained. Originally, we thought we might give it to you when you had a family of your own. Later, after your divorce, we considered telling you, but what? Her voice had an edge now. But you were changing, becoming more focused on material success than the values we had tried to teach you. We worried about what you might do with the information. Rebecca's lips thinned. So you didn't trust me. We wanted to protect you as much as the property, I said gently. We saw how bitter the divorce made you, how it seemed to harden something in you. We hoped that with time, you might find your way back to the person you were before. The naive idealist, you mean? She gave a short, humorless laugh. Life took care of that illusion. No, the daughter who valued relationships over possessions, who found joy in simple pleasures, who treated people with compassion and respect, not as means to an end. Rebecca flinched as if I'd slapped her. You think I don't value our relationship? That I see you merely as a means to an end? I don't know anymore, I admitted sadly. That's why I showed you the deed, to see how you would react, to see if your concern for me is genuine or if it's about what you can gain from me. She pushed the papers away, her expression hurt and angry. Well, congratulations on your little test. What did my reaction tell you? I studied her face, seeing the wounded pride, the defensiveness, but also, somewhere deep in her eyes, a flicker of shame. Perhaps all was not lost. It tells me you're at a crossroads, Rebecca, just as I am. We can continue down this path of distrust and manipulation, or we can try to rebuild what we once had, a relationship based on honesty and mutual respect. And the cottage? She asked, her voice controlled. It's not about the cottage. It's about what it represents: trust, legacy, family values. Your father and I always intended it to be yours someday. But how and when that happens depends on the choices you make now. Rebecca stood, gathering her purse. I need time to think. This is a lot to process. I nodded, not trying to stop her. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you're ready to talk. At the door, she paused. For what it's worth, I do love you, Mom, even if I haven't shown it the right way lately. I know, I said softly. I've never doubted that you love me, but love without respect isn't enough. We both deserve better. After she left, I cleared the dishes mechanically, my mind replaying our conversation. Had I done the right thing in revealing the cottage? Had I reached her even a little? Only time would tell. That night, I dreamed of Harold again. We were walking along the beach near the main cottage, hand in hand as we had done so many times in reality. You did well, he said in the dream. You spoke your truth with compassion. But will it make any difference? I asked. His dream self smiled that gentle smile I missed so desperately. That's up to her now. You've done your part. I woke feeling strangely peaceful, despite the uncertainty that lay ahead. Whatever happened next, I had been true to myself and to the values Harold and I had shared. That would have to be enough for now. Chapter 5. The Fallout. 3 days passed without a word from Rebecca. I tried to maintain my normal routine, volunteering, at the library, tending my garden, meeting friends for lunch, but her silence weighed on me. Had I pushed too hard? Had I damaged our relationship beyond repair? On the 4th day, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened the door, Rebecca stood there, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a sweater instead of her usual polished business attire. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice subdued. I stepped aside, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Of course. Would you like some tea?" She nodded, following me to the kitchen in silence. I busied myself with the kettle and teapot, giving her time to gather her thoughts. When we were settled at the kitchen table, mugs of steaming tea before us, Rebecca finally spoke. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since our last conversation. About what you said. About who I've become." She cradled her mug between her hands, staring into the amber liquid. "And I've made some decisions." I waited, not wanting to interrupt whatever she had come to say. "First, I've recused myself from all involvement with the Vitality account, at work." She glanced up to gauge my reaction. I spoke with the CEO and explained that I have a conflict of interest. He wasn't happy, but he understood once I explained the situation. This was unexpected. The Vitality account was clearly important to her career. "That must have been a difficult conversation," I said carefully. "It was," she admitted. "Potentially career-limiting, according to some colleagues, but it was the right thing to do." She took a sip of her tea. "I also spoke with James Peterson yesterday." My eyebrows rose in surprise. "You did?" "I asked him to review the revised documents you signed. He walked me through the differences and explained why your approach provides better protection for your autonomy." She met my eyes directly. "He's right. The documents I brought were overreaching." "Thank you for acknowledging that," I said, deeply touched by this admission. Rebecca continued, her voice growing stronger. I've also been doing some soul searching about who I've become since the divorce. You were right. I have changed, and not for the better. I've been so focused on financial security, on never being vulnerable again, that I lost sight of what really matters. She reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry, Mom, for trying to manipulate you, for not respecting your wishes, for treating this house, your home, as an asset rather than the place where I grew up, where Dad and you created our family. Tears pricked at my eyes. This was the daughter I remembered, the one whose heart had seemed buried beneath layers of ambition and hurt. The cottage took me by surprise, she continued. Not just its existence, but what it revealed about your trust, or lack of trust, in me. That hurt. But I understand why you and Dad kept it secret. I haven't given you much reason to trust me lately. It wasn't about trust initially, I explained. It was about waiting for the right moment, the right circumstances. Later, yes, we became concerned about how you might view it, as another asset to leverage rather than a family legacy to cherish. She nodded, accepting this hard truth without argument. I want to earn back your trust, Mom. I want to be someone you can be proud of again, someone I can be proud of. Oh, Rebecca, I said, squeezing her hand. I've always been proud of you. Your accomplishments, your intelligence, your determination. I just missed the compassionate heart that used to balance those qualities. I think it's still there, she said with a small smile. Just a bit battered and hidden away for safekeeping. We talked for hours, moving from the kitchen to the living room as morning turned to afternoon. Rebecca shared more about her divorce than she ever had before. How Stephen's betrayal with her best friend had shattered not just her heart, but her belief in herself, her judgment, her worth. I threw myself into work because it was the one area of my life I could control, she explained. The one place where success had clear metrics, where emotions couldn't cloud my judgment. But life isn't a balance sheet, I said gently. People aren't assets or liabilities. I know that now, she acknowledged. Or I'm relearning it at least. As the day waned, our conversation turned to practical matters. I want you to know that I support whatever decision you make about this house, Rebecca said. If you want to stay here for the rest of your life, I'll help make that possible. Home health aides, modifications for safety, whatever you need. Thank you, I said sincerely, though I'm not quite ready for grab bars and ramps just yet. She laughed, the sound warming my heart. Fair enough, but the offer stands whenever you need it. And if I eventually decide that maintaining this place is too much? I asked, curious about her response. Then we'll find a solution together, she promised. Something that honors your wishes and preserves your independence. No more Sunshine Meadows sales pitches, I promise. As she prepared to leave, Rebecca hesitated at the door. About the cottage in Maine. I'd like to see it someday if that's okay. Not to assess its value or anything like that. Just to see a place that was special to you and Dad. I'd like that, I said, feeling a weight lift from my heart. Perhaps we could go together this summer. It's beautiful in July when the lupines are in bloom. Her face lit up with genuine pleasure. I'd like that very much. After she left, I sat in Harold's study, surrounded by his books and the subtle scent of pipe tobacco that lingered even after all these years. We did all right, didn't we? I said aloud, imagining him there with me. She found her way back. No audible answer came, of course, but I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The road ahead might still have bumps and detours, but Rebecca and I had taken an important first step toward healing our relationship. And that, more than any property or possession, was the true legacy Harold and I had hoped to create. Chapter 6. Summer Revelations. As spring gave way to summer, Rebecca and I began the delicate process of rebuilding our relationship. She visited more regularly, often bringing books she thought I might enjoy, or plants for my garden, rather, than legal documents requiring my signature. Our conversations ranged widely, touching on topics we had avoided for years: her hopes and fears, my memories of Harold, the mistakes and triumphs we had both experienced. In early July, we made the trip to Maine as planned. Rebecca insisted on driving, her sleek SUV making the journey more comfortable than my aging sedan would have. As we traveled north, the landscape gradually changed, cities giving way to suburbs, suburbs to rolling countryside, and finally to the rugged beauty of the Maine coast. "It's so peaceful here," Rebecca commented as we wound along coastal roads, the ocean appearing and disappearing from view with each curve. "No wonder you and Dad loved it." "It was our sanctuary," I agreed. "A place where we could just be ourselves, away from work pressures and daily responsibilities." When we finally turned onto the narrow lane leading to the cottage, I felt a familiar mix of emotions: joy at returning to this special place, sadness that Harold wasn't beside me, and now, a new feeling: hope that Rebecca would come to love it as we had. The cottage stood just as I remembered, a weathered cedar-shingled structure nestled among pines, its blue shutters faded by salt air and sun. Wild roses scrambled over the picket fence, their pink blooms nodding in the sea breeze. Rebecca parked and sat for a moment, taking it all in. "It's exactly how I would have imagined it," she said softly, unpretentious but full of character. "Like your father," I said with a smile. She helped me carry our bags inside, exclaiming over the simple, comfortable furnishings: the overstuffed sofa facing the stone fireplace, the pine dining table with chairs Harold had restored himself, the colorful braided rugs that warmed the wide plank floors. "It feels like home," she said, running her hand along the bookshelf filled with well-worn paperbacks, "even though I've never been here before." "Home isn't always about familiarity," I observed. "Sometimes it's about a feeling of belonging, of rightness." We spent the afternoon settling in, unpacking groceries we had purchased in the nearby town, opening windows to let in the sea air, making up beds with fresh linens. In the evening, we sat on the small porch with glasses of wine, watching the sun set over the water in a spectacular display of gold and crimson. "I understand now why you kept this place separate from your everyday life," Rebecca said, breaking a comfortable silence. "It's like a different world here, a place where real life can't intrude." "That was the idea," I agreed. "Though as we got older, your father and I talked about making it our primary home, selling the house in the city and retiring here permanently." "Why didn't you after Dad died?" she asked curiously. I considered the question, partly because it felt too final, like closing the door on that chapter of my life completely, partly because I wasn't ready to leave our home, our friends, my volunteer work, and partly because of you. "Me?" She looked surprised. "I didn't want to move farther away from you," I explained. "Even though our relationship was strained, I held on to the hope that things would improve, that you might need me nearby." Rebecca's eyes glistened in the fading light. "I always needed you, Mom. I just didn't know how to show it without feeling vulnerable." The next morning, we explored the shoreline, walking along the rocky beach and collecting interesting shells and sea glass. Rebecca seemed lighter here, less guarded. She laughed more easily, asked questions about my life with Harold, shared stories from her own childhood that I hadn't heard before. After lunch, she noticed a weathered wooden chest in the corner of the living room. "What's in there?" she asked, pointing to it. "Family treasures," I replied. "Photo albums, letters, mementos from our time here. Would you like to see?" She nodded eagerly, and we spent the afternoon going through the contents of the chest. I showed her photographs of Harold and me when we first purchased the cottage: younger, hair still dark, faces unlined but recognizable. There were journals I had kept over the years, documenting our vacations here, the changing seasons, the gradual improvements we had made to the property. And there were letters, dozens of them, exchanged between Harold and me during the early years of our marriage when his work sometimes took him away for weeks at a time. We had saved them all, bringing them to the cottage for safekeeping. "May I read some?" Rebecca asked hesitantly. "Of course," I said, touched by her interest. "They're part of your history, too." She selected one at random, unfolding the yellowed paper carefully. As she read, her expression softened, and I saw tears form in her eyes. "He loved you so much," she said, looking up. "The way he writes about you, about the life you were building together. It's beautiful." "We were very lucky," I acknowledged. "We had our struggles like any couple, but the foundation was always strong." Rebecca refolded the letter and chose another, then another. "I wish I had known this side of Dad," she said eventually. "He was always more reserved with me." "That was his generation," I explained. "Men weren't encouraged to show vulnerability, especially with their children. But believe me, he adored you. Some of his happiest moments were watching you grow, seeing the woman you were becoming." "And what would he think of the woman I am now?" she asked, a shadow crossing her face. "He would see someone trying to find her way back to herself," I said honestly. "Someone with the courage to recognize her mistakes and the strength to change course. He would be proud of that, as I am." That evening, we built a small fire in the fireplace, the July night being cool enough to warrant it. As we sat watching the flames, Rebecca broached a subject that clearly had been on her mind. "Mom, I want to talk about the future. Yours and mine." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I've been offered a position with a different company," she said. "A smaller pharmaceutical firm focused on developing treatments for rare diseases. The salary is less than I'm making now, but the work is more meaningful, more aligned with why I went into healthcare in the first place." "That sounds like a positive change," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "Have you accepted?" "Not yet. It would mean relocating to Boston." She hesitated. "And I'm concerned about being farther away from you." "Boston isn't that far," I pointed out. "A few hours' drive." "True, but if you were to need help suddenly, I couldn't just pop over." She looked at me earnestly. "Which brings me to a suggestion. What if you considered spending part of the year here at the cottage? Perhaps summers and early fall when the weather is nice. I could visit more easily from Boston, and you'd have this beautiful place to enjoy." I was touched by her consideration. "That's a thoughtful suggestion. I have been thinking that maintaining the city house year-round is becoming a burden." "You'd consider it then?" Her face brightened. "I'm open to the possibility," I said carefully. "But what about winters? The cottage isn't insulated for year-round use." "You could spend winters in the city house," she suggested. "Or if you wanted more company, I have a guest suite in my new place in Boston. It's private but connected, so you'd have independence with support nearby." The old suspicion flickered briefly. Was this another attempt to get her hands on my house? But I pushed it away. Rebecca had demonstrated genuine change over the past months, and this suggestion seemed motivated by care rather than calculation. "Let me think about it," I said. "It's a significant change to consider." She nodded, respecting my need for time. "Of course. No pressure, just options." We spent the rest of the week exploring the area, visiting the small town with its quaint shops and galleries, hiking gentle trails through pine forests, sitting for hours on the porch with books and binoculars for spotting seabirds. The tension that had characterized our relationship for so long continued to ease, replaced by a growing companionship that reminded me of earlier, happier times. On our last evening, as we packed for the return journey the next day, Rebecca discovered a small locked box at the bottom of the wooden chest. "What's this?" she asked, lifting it out. I felt a flutter of surprise. I had forgotten about the box and its contents. "That's something your father wanted you to have someday," I said, retrieving a small key from my jewelry case. "I suppose now is as good a time as any." She accepted the key with curiosity, then carefully opened the box. Inside were several items. A pocket watch that had belonged to Harold's father, a small velvet pouch containing his mother's cameo brooch, and an envelope with Rebecca's name written in Harold's distinctive handwriting. "He left me a letter?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. "He wrote it the year before he died, when his health first began to fail. He wanted you to have his thoughts, his wishes for you, even if he wasn't here to share them in person." With trembling hands, she opened the envelope and began to read. I moved to the porch to give her privacy, gazing out at the moonlight silvering the water. After some time, I heard her footsteps behind me. "Did you know what he wrote?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "No," I said truthfully. "That was between you and him." She sat beside me, the letter clutched in her hand. "He knew he was dying, didn't he? Even before the diagnosis." "He suspected," I acknowledged. He had watched his own father decline from the same heart condition. The signs were familiar to him. "He writes about regrets," she said softly, "about working too much when I was young, about focusing on providing financially rather than emotionally, about hoping I would find better balance in my own life." She looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "And he was worried I was making the same mistakes he had." "Your father was an insightful man," I said gently, "and he loved you enough to share difficult truths." "He also writes about this cottage," she continued, "about how it represented what really mattered to him: family, simplicity, connection to nature and each other. How he hoped it would someday mean as much to me." I reached over and took her hand. "And does it mean something to you?" She looked around at the moonlit pines, the silver-tipped waves, the weathered porch where we sat. "Yes," she said simply, "more than I could have imagined a week ago." We sat in silence for a time, listening to the rhythmic crash of waves on the shore. Finally, Rebecca folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope. "I'm going to take the job in Boston," she said with newfound certainty. "And I think your suggestion about splitting time between the city house and here makes sense, at least as a starting point. We can reevaluate as circumstances change." "That sounds sensible," I agreed. "Gradual transitions are often easier than abrupt ones." She turned to me, her expression serious. "I want you to know that I'm not interested in your house as property anymore. Whatever decisions you make about where to live should be based on what makes you happy, what works best for your quality of life. I'll support whatever you choose." The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable, and I felt the last of my reservations dissolve. "Thank you, Rebecca. That means more than you know." In that moment, sitting with my daughter in the place, Harold, and I had loved so much, I felt a sense of completion, as if a circle that had been broken was finally whole again. The journey hadn't been straightforward, and there would doubtless be challenges ahead. But the foundation had been restored, and that was what mattered most. On Chapter 7, Unexpected Developments. The transition back to city life after our week in Maine was jarring. The noise, the pace, the constant stimulation all felt overwhelming after the peaceful rhythm of seaside days. But as I settled back into my routine, I found myself viewing my house with new eyes, noticing things I had overlooked or taken for granted. The stairs did require more effort than they once had. The garden, while still my joy, demanded physical labor that left me exhausted. The rooms I seldom used gathered dust despite Mrs. Abernathy's twice-weekly cleaning visits. Perhaps Rebecca's suggestion of splitting my time between locations wasn't merely a compromise but a practical solution. I could enjoy the cottage during summer and early fall, the city house during the more moderate months of spring and late fall, and perhaps, though I wasn't ready to commit to this yet, spend the harsh winter months in Boston near Rebecca. I was mulling these possibilities one morning over breakfast when the phone rang. It was James Peterson. Martha, good morning. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Something in his tone alerted me. Of course, James. Is everything all right? He hesitated. I've received some information that concerns you. It might be nothing, but I thought you should know. Go on, I said, setting down my teacup. I was at a charity function last night, the Hospital Foundation Gala. George Bennett was there, and he mentioned that Vitality Senior Living is still actively pursuing properties in your neighborhood. Even after I refused to sell? I asked, surprised. Yes, and that's what concerns me. According to George, they've acquired a fourth property on your street, the Miller's house at number 27. The Millers were a couple in their 50s, the youngest homeowners on the block. But they weren't planning to sell, I said, confused. Tom just completed that workshop addition last summer. Apparently, the offer was too good to refuse, James explained, significantly above market value. I considered this information. But even with 4 properties, they don't have enough contiguous land for their facility without my house. That's true, James agreed, which is why I'm concerned they might escalate their efforts to acquire your property. But Rebecca has recused herself from the Vitality account, I pointed out. She told me so herself. I believe her, James said quickly, but Vitality might pursue other avenues of pressure. Just be vigilant, Martha, and call me immediately if anything unusual happens. After hanging up, I sat for a long time, thinking. The peace I had found in Maine felt suddenly fragile, threatened by forces beyond my control. Should I call Rebecca, share this new information? Or would that seem like I was questioning her honesty about stepping away from the Vitality account? Before I could decide, the doorbell rang. Through the front window, I glimpsed an unfamiliar car in my driveway. Sleek, black, expensive. Not Rebecca's vehicle, nor one belonging to any of my friends. I approached the door cautiously, using the peephole Harold had installed years ago. A man stood on my porch, tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, perhaps in his mid-50s, with silver threading through his dark hair. "Who is it?" I called without opening the door. "Mrs. Carlton? My name is Richard Harmon. I'm the CEO of Vitality Senior Living. I was hoping for a few minutes of your time." My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm not interested in selling my home, Mr. Harmon, as I've made clear to previous representatives of your company." "I understand your reluctance," he said smoothly, "but I believe I can offer a perspective previous discussions may have lacked. May I come in?" "No," I said firmly. "This is my private residence, not a venue. For business negotiations, please leave my property." There was a pause then. "As you wish, Mrs. Carlton, but I'll leave my card. When you're ready to discuss the inevitable, please call me directly." I watched through the peephole as he placed a business card in my mailbox and returned to his car. Only after he had driven away did I retrieve the card, my hands shaking slightly with anger and something close to fear. Richard Harmon, CEO, the card stated simply, with a direct phone number below. No mention of Vitality Senior Living, as if I was supposed to know who he was, as if his very name should impress me. I called James immediately, describing the unexpected visit. His concern was palpable even over the phone. "This is unusual," he said. "CEOs don't typically make house calls for property acquisitions. They must be getting desperate." "Or confident," I suggested. He seemed very sure I would eventually agree to sell. He used the word inevitable. "Nothing is inevitable, Martha. The house is yours, and you have every right to keep it as long as you wish." James paused. "Have you spoken with Rebecca about our conversation this morning?" "Not yet," I admitted. "I wasn't sure if I should." "I think you should," he advised. "Complete transparency is important right now, and she might have insights into Harmon's approach that could be helpful." I agreed, promising to call Rebecca that evening. But before I could do so, I received another unexpected visitor, My neighbor, Ellen Peterson, no relation to James, from across the street. Ellen was in her 60s, a retired schoolteacher who had lived in the neighborhood even longer than I had. "Martha, I'm so glad you're home," she said when I opened the door. "Have you heard about the Millers?" I invited her in, offering tea, which she accepted gratefully. "James Peterson mentioned they'd sold their house," I said as I prepared the tea tray. Ellen nodded vigorously. "For an obscene amount of money, but that's not the whole story." She leaned forward confidentially. "Tom told my Harry that they didn't really want to sell, but they felt pressured. That company, Vitality something, started making things difficult for them." "Difficult?" I asked, setting the tea tray on the coffee table. "In what way?" Ellen accepted a cup, adding a spoonful of sugar. "Well, first there were the inspectors, city officials suddenly finding all sorts of code violations with Tom's new workshop, violations that miraculously disappeared once they agreed to sell." A chill ran through me. "That sounds like harassment." "It gets worse," Ellen continued, blowing on her tea to cool it. "Then their property taxes were reassessed. Just theirs. Mind you, not anyone else's on the street. Almost doubled overnight. Tom filed an appeal, of course, but these things take time, and in the meantime, they'd have to pay the higher amount." "That's outrageous," I said, my indignation growing. "Surely that can't be legal." Ellen shrugged. "Legal or not, it happened. And then the final straw, Tom's position at the university was suddenly under review. Budget cuts, they said. But only his department, only his position." I set my cup down with a clatter. "Are you suggesting Vitality somehow influenced the university?" "Tom sits on the Board of Regents," Ellen pointed out. "A major donor suddenly threatened to withdraw funding if certain operational changes weren't made. I'm not saying there's a direct connection, but..." She let the implication hang in the air. "The timing is certainly suspicious," I acknowledged. "But why are you telling me this?" Ellen's kind face grew serious. "Because I saw that fancy car in your driveway earlier today. I recognized it. The same man visited the Millers a week before all their trouble started." She reached across and patted my hand. "You're my friend, Martha. I don't want to see the same thing happen to you." After Ellen left, I sat in my garden, trying to sort through this disturbing information. Could a company like Vitality really orchestrate such a targeted campaign against homeowners who refused to sell? It seemed far-fetched, like something from a movie rather than real life. Yet Ellen had no reason to exaggerate or invent such a story. I was still contemplating this when my phone rang. It was Rebecca. "Mom, are you all right? I just had the strangest conversation with Richard Harmon." Hearing that name sent another chill through me. "Harmon called you? What did he want?" "To offer me my old position back," Rebecca said, her voice tense. "Heading the Vitality account, with a substantial raise and bonus structure. He said that circumstances had changed and the conflict of interest I was concerned about was no longer relevant." "What did he mean by that?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I knew. "He implied that you would be selling your house soon, so there would be no conflict." Rebecca's voice hardened. "I told him he was mistaken, that you had no intention of selling, but he just smiled and said, 'We'll see.'" I quickly shared what James had told me and Ellen's disturbing account of the Millers' experience. Rebecca listened in growing horror. "This is corporate intimidation," she said when I'd finished. "It's unethical and possibly illegal. Mom, I'm coming over right now." "That's not necessary." "It is," she interrupted firmly. "If Harmon approached, both of us on the same day, he's escalating. I don't want you dealing with this alone." An hour later, Rebecca arrived, bringing her laptop and a determined expression. We sat at the dining room table as she outlined what she knew about Vitality's business practices. "They've done this before," she explained, pulling up news articles on her computer. "In Chicago, in Phoenix, in Atlanta. They identify neighborhoods for expansion, acquire properties one by one, and use various pressure tactics on holdouts. But they've never been held accountable? I asked, scanning the headlines she showed me. Nothing that stuck. They're careful to maintain plausible deniability. The code inspectors, the tax assessors, the university donors, none can be directly linked to Vitality. But the pattern is clear once you know what to look for. I sat back, feeling suddenly tired and overwhelmed. What do we do, Rebecca? I don't want to sell, but I also don't want to spend my remaining years fighting a corporate giant. Rebecca covered my hand with hers. We fight smart, not hard. First, we document everything. Every interaction, every unusual occurrence. Second, we get legal protection. James can help with that. And third, she hesitated, then continued with resolve. We go public if necessary. Corporate bullies hate publicity. For the next week, Rebecca stayed with me, working remotely from my dining room. We installed security cameras at the front and back doors, and she documented the visit from Harmon and Ellen's account of the Millers' experience. James filed a formal complaint with the city regarding potential abuse of regulatory powers in EU. The case of the Millers' workshop violations and tax reassessment. Then the strange incidents began. First, my water was shut off without notice. When I called the utility company, they claimed there was a billing error, an error that took 2 days to resolve, during which Rebecca had to bring in bottled water for basic needs. Next, a building inspector appeared, citing an anonymous complaint about structural concerns. He found nothing, but the mere fact of his visit was unsettling. Then my mail began arriving opened or not at all. When Rebecca complained to the local post office, they suggested it must be simple human error. Each incident in isolation could be explained away as coincidence or bureaucratic incompetence. Together, they formed a pattern of harassment too deliberate to ignore. This is how they operate, Rebecca said grimly after the postal supervisor dismissed our concerns. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. They make daily life so difficult that selling seems like the easiest option. I felt a growing anger replacing my initial fear. This was my home, my community. The idea that a corporation could bully me out of it through these underhanded tactics was infuriating. I'm not giving in, I declared one evening as Rebecca and I sat in the living room, reviewing the day's developments. This house meant everything to Harold and me. I won't let them take it through intimidation. Rebecca smiled, a fierce pride in her eyes. That's the spirit, Mom, and I'm with you all the way. The next day brought a new development, one we hadn't anticipated. The doorbell rang mid-morning, and on the porch stood Tom Miller, my former neighbor, looking uncomfortable and slightly ashamed. Mrs. Carlton, he began when I invited him in. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you weeks ago. Over coffee, he confessed that Vitality had included a confidentiality clause in their purchase agreement. He wasn't supposed to discuss the circumstances that led to his selling. But I can't keep quiet anymore, he said, his hands wrapped tightly around his mug. Not after hearing they're doing the same thing to you. What followed was a detailed account that confirmed Ellen's version and added disturbing new information. The pressure had been methodical, escalating when subtle tactics failed. And most concerning, Tom had evidence, emails, recorded phone calls, photographs of the same vehicles appearing repeatedly near his home. I was gathering ammunition for a possible lawsuit, he explained. Then they offered enough money that fighting seemed pointless. We took the deal and the gag order that came with it. He looked at me earnestly. But I kept copies of everything, and I want you to have them. He placed a flash drive on the table. It won't be enough for a lawsuit on its own, but combined with whatever you're experiencing now, maybe it could help. After Tom left, Rebecca immediately plugged the flash drive into her laptop. This is gold, Mom, she said as she scrolled through the contents. Names, dates, specific incidents with documentation. Tom was thorough. But will it be enough? I asked. Vitality has deep pockets and expensive lawyers. Maybe not for a court case, Rebecca admitted. But for public opinion? Absolutely. Her eyes gleamed with determination. I think it's time for phase 3 of our plan. Going public, I said, both apprehensive and resolute. Rebecca nodded. I have a contact at the Tribune, a journalist who specializes in corporate accountability stories. With your permission, I'd like to share Tom's evidence and our own documentation with her. I considered the implications. Going public would mean scrutiny, possibly retaliation from Vitality. But continuing to fight these shadow battles was taking a toll on my health and peace of mind. Do it, I decided. Let's bring this into the light. The reporter, Sophia Chen, met with us the following day. She reviewed our evidence with professional objectivity, but couldn't hide her interest as the pattern emerged. This is compelling, she said finally. Not just the tactics themselves, but the coordination behind them. It suggests systematic corporate overreach rather than isolated incidents. She looked up from her notes. But you should understand what you're getting into. Vitality will deny everything. They may even counterattack, try to discredit you personally. I understand the risks, I said firmly. But this isn't just about me anymore. It's about everyone in this neighborhood, and others where companies like Vitality operate. With impunity, Sophia nodded, respect evident in her expression. I'll need a few days to corroborate details and give Vitality a chance to respond. But I think we have a story here. True to her word, Sophia worked quickly. By the end of the week, she had verified key elements of our account and officially requested comment from Vitality. Their response was a terse, no comment that spoke volumes. 3 days later, the story broke. Front page of the Sunday Tribune, with the headline, Corporate Giant Accused of Bullying Elderly Homeowners. The article detailed the pattern of harassment against both the Millers and me, including documentation and quotes from other neighbors who had observed suspicious activities. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. By Monday morning, local television stations were running segments on the story. By Tuesday, it had been picked up by national news outlets. Vitality's stock price took a hit as investors worried about potential lawsuits and regulatory scrutiny. On Wednesday, Richard Harmon called Rebecca directly. This can still be resolved amicably, he said, his smooth tone now underlaid with tension. Your mother could name her price for the property, within reason, of course. Rebecca put the call on speaker so I could hear. This isn't about price, Mr. Harmon, I interjected. It's about respect and dignity. Your company tried to bully me out of my home through underhanded tactics. There's no price tag that can make that acceptable. Mrs. Carlton, he began, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. I understand you're upset, but these accusations are greatly exaggerated. We've always operated within the law. Save it for your press conference, Rebecca interrupted. We have documentation, Mr. Harmon, and more homeowners are coming forward every day with similar stories. This last part was true. Since the article's publication, Sophia had received calls from residents in other neighborhoods where Vitality had developments, all describing similar patterns of pressure and intimidation. After a telling silence, Harmon's voice hardened. You're making a mistake. Both of you. This won't end well. Is that a threat, Mr. Harmon? Rebecca asked coolly. Because threatening a potential witness in what's becoming a multi-jurisdictional investigation into your company's practices seems unwise. The call ended abruptly. Rebecca and I looked at each other, knowing we had just raised the stakes significantly. He's scared, Rebecca observed, and scared people sometimes make desperate moves. What do you think he'll do? I asked. She considered this. Best case? They back off completely, deciding we're not worth the negative publicity. Worst case? They escalate one last time before retreating. And what would escalation look like? Rebecca's expression was grim. I'm not sure, but let's make sure we're prepared for anything. That evening, James came over to review our security measures and legal options. The publicity has changed. The dynamic, he noted. Vitality can't operate in the shadows anymore, which limits their tactics. But doesn't eliminate them, Rebecca pointed out. James nodded soberly. True. Corporate entities backed into a corner can be unpredictable. I'd suggest you both stay here together for now, maintain the security cameras, and document any unusual occurrences. As if on cue, my phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously, putting it on speaker. Mrs. Carlton? This is Linda. Cooper from Green Meadows Landscaping. We're scheduled to remove a large oak tree from your property tomorrow morning. I'm calling to confirm the time works for you. I frowned in confusion. There must be a mistake. I haven't scheduled any tree removal. There was a pause. We have an order form here signed by a Martha Carlton for removal of a diseased oak on the property at 1542 Maple Street. That is your address, correct? Yes, but I didn't sign any such form. And there's no diseased oak in my yard. Let me check our records again, Linda said, sounding concerned. After a moment, she returned. The order was placed 3 days ago. We have a scanned signature form, but now that I look more closely, this doesn't match the other paperwork. Let me speak with my manager and call you back. After she hung up, James, Rebecca, and I exchanged alarmed glances. The oak tree in the front yard, I said slowly. It's the oldest tree on the property. Harold's father planted it when he was a boy. And it would be convenient for construction. Access if it were gone, Rebecca added grimly. When Linda called back 10 minutes later, her voice was apologetic. Mrs. Carlton, I'm so sorry about the confusion. It appears someone falsified an order using your name. We've canceled it, of course, and we're reviewing our verification procedures. This is completely unacceptable. After thanking her, I sat heavily on the sofa. They were going to cut down our tree, I said, my voice shaking with anger. 100-year-old oak just gone. But they didn't, Rebecca reminded me, sitting beside me. Because people are watching now, because we're fighting back. The next morning brought news that vindicated our stand. The State Attorney General announced a preliminary investigation into Vitality Senior Living's business practices, citing concerning patterns of behavior across multiple communities. 3 city council members called for a review of all recent building code violations and tax reassessments in our neighborhood, and a group of homeowners from a Chicago suburb filed a class action lawsuit against Vitality, alleging similar tactics to those we had experienced. By the end of the week, Vitality's stock had dropped nearly 20%. Richard Harmon issued a public statement announcing an internal review of acquisition practices and the suspension of several regional managers pending investigation. He stopped short of admitting wrongdoing, but promised full cooperation with regulatory authorities. The pressure on our household eased immediately. No more mysterious utility interruptions, no more unscheduled inspections, no more mail tampering. The silent siege had lifted. Is it really over? I asked James when he called with updates on the Attorney General's investigation. For you personally? I believe so, he said. Vitality can't afford the scrutiny that would come with continued targeting of the primary whistleblower in this case. For the company? This is just beginning. The regulatory and legal challenges they're facing could take years to resolve. I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief, certainly, but also a lingering anger at what they had put me through, what they had put others through. And beneath that, a quiet pride in having stood my ground. Rebecca confirmed James's assessment that evening. My contacts in the industry say Vitality is in full damage control mode. They've abandoned the expansion plans for this neighborhood entirely. Your house is safe, Mom. We celebrated quietly with a bottle of champagne on the back patio, watching fireflies rise from the garden as dusk settled. The summer evening was perfect, warm but not humid, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of roses and freshly cut grass. "I've been thinking," I said as we sat in comfortable silence, "about the future, about the house." Rebecca turned to me, her expression carefully neutral. "Oh? I still love this place, and now that I've fought so hard to keep it, I appreciate it even more." I smiled at the irony. "But your suggestion about splitting my time does make sense practically. The cottage in summer and early fall, here in spring and late fall. And winters?" she prompted gently. I took a deep breath. "I'd like to try your guest suite in Boston, this coming winter, just as a trial to see how it feels. If it works for both of us, perhaps that could become part of the rotation." Rebecca's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "I'd like that very much. And if it doesn't work out, there's no pressure. The city house will still be here." "Exactly," I agreed. "No irrevocable decisions, just options, flexibility." Later, as Rebecca cleared away our glasses, I remained on the patio, gazing up at the emerging stars. I thought of Harold, of the life we had built together, of the values we had tried to pass on to our daughter. He would be proud of how we had both handled this crisis, not just defending our property, but standing up for principle, for community, for the right to age with dignity and self-determination. The house was still my home, but I was beginning to understand that home could be more fluid than I had believed, that it could exist in multiple places, in different seasons, in the presence of those we love rather than solely within specific walls. As if reading my thoughts, Rebecca rejoined me, draping a light shawl around my shoulders against the cooling night air. "I was just thinking about Dad," she said softly, "about what he wrote in that letter at the cottage." "What part specifically?" I asked. "He said that the greatest legacy isn't property or possessions, but the courage to live according to your deepest values." She smiled, her eyes shining in the faint light from the kitchen windows. "I think we honored that legacy these past weeks." "Yes," I agreed, my heart full. "I think we did." Chapter 8: New Beginnings. The aftermath of the Vitality confrontation brought unexpected changes to our lives. The story had captured public attention, turning me into something of a reluctant local celebrity. Neighbors I barely knew stopped to express support when I walked to the corner store. The local senior center invited me to speak about standing up to corporate pressure. A community legal aid organization asked if I would share my experience with their clients. "You've become an inspiration," Rebecca observed with amusement one morning as we sorted through the pile of supportive cards and letters that had arrived. "The grandmother who fought back." I grimaced at the characterization. "I'm not even a grandmother, and I didn't do it alone. You were essential to this fight." "True," she acknowledged with a smile. "But the mother-daughter duo who exposed corporate malfeasance doesn't have the same ring to it." The publicity had professional consequences for Rebecca as well. Several pharmaceutical companies approached her with job offers, impressed by her ethical stance in recusing herself from the Vitality account. The small Boston firm she had mentioned increased their offer, adding flexible work arrangements that would allow her to spend more time with me during my planned winter stay. By late August, we had settled into a comfortable routine. Rebecca divided her time between her apartment in the city and my house, working remotely 3 days a week to help me prepare for the transitions ahead. We sorted through decades of accumulated possessions, deciding what to keep, what to store, what to give away. It was emotionally taxing work, but curiously liberating as well. I had no idea we had so many fondue sets. I marveled one afternoon as we excavated the depths of a kitchen cabinet. "Who needs 3? The 70s have a lot to answer for," Rebecca replied, carefully wrapping one to donate. "Should we keep this one for the cottage?" We could have a retro dinner party next summer. These casual references to shared future plans warmed my heart. Our relationship had transformed through crisis, rediscovering its foundation of love and mutual respect beneath the accumulated tensions of recent years. As September approached, we finalized arrangements for my first extended stay at the main cottage. The property management company that maintained it in my absence had handled the winterization each year, but now they would reverse the process, opening the place up for a 2-month autumn residence. Are you sure you'll be comfortable there? Alone? Rebecca asked as we discussed the details. It's quite isolated, especially after the summer people leave. I won't be completely alone, I assured her. Martha and Louise have promised to visit for a week in October, and you'll come up on weekends when you can. I smiled at her concerned expression. Besides, I've always enjoyed solitude. It will be peaceful. Rebecca nodded, though she still looked worried. Just promise you'll use the alert system we installed, and keep your cell phone charged and with you at all times. Yes, dear, I said with exaggerated patience, though I appreciated her concern. I've managed to stay alive for 72 years. I suspect I can handle a few weeks in Maine. The day before I was scheduled to leave, James Peterson called with news about the ongoing Vitality investigation. The Attorney General's office has expanded their inquiry, he reported. They're now looking at similar patterns in 3 other states, and the class action lawsuit has added dozens of new plaintiffs. Good, I said firmly. They should be held accountable. There's more, James continued. Richard Harmon has been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation's outcome. The board is distancing themselves from him, suggesting he acted without their knowledge or approval. The convenient scapegoat, Rebecca commented, listening on the extension, though I don't doubt he was the mastermind. Indeed, James agreed. In any case, Martha, you should know that your stand has had significant repercussions. Vitality's stock is down almost 30% now, and their expansion plans nationwide are on hold. After the call ended, Rebecca turned to me with a thoughtful expression. You know, when this all started, I was on the wrong side, aligned with Vitality's interests rather than yours. I still feel ashamed about that. You corrected course when it mattered, I reminded her, and you've more than made up for any initial missteps. She shook her head. It still bothers me how easily I rationalized my behavior, telling myself it was for your benefit, when really it was about my career, my financial interests. We all have blind spots, I said gently. The important thing is recognizing them and making different choices moving forward. The next morning, Rebecca drove me to Maine. The journey felt symbolic somehow, a transition not just between places, but between chapters of my life. As we traveled north, the landscape gradually transformed from urban density to rural openness, matching my own internal shift from confinement to possibility. The cottage welcomed us with the timeless scent of pine and salt air. Rebecca spent 2 days helping me settle in, stocking the kitchen, arranging my favorite books and photographs, ensuring all systems were working properly, before reluctantly heading back to the city. Call me every day, she instructed as she prepared to leave. Morning and evening, and I'll be back next weekend. I promised, touched by her protective instincts. As her car disappeared down the lane, I turned to face the cottage, my home for the next 2 months. A sense of peaceful anticipation filled me. This was a new adventure, a gift I had almost denied myself through fear of change. The autumn days developed a gentle rhythm. Mornings spent with coffee on the porch, watching the changing light on the water. Afternoons walking the shoreline or reading by the fire when rain tapped against the windows. Evenings calling Rebecca, or friends, cooking simple meals, writing. In the journal, I had started to document this transition time. The isolation that had concerned Rebecca proved to be nourishing rather than limiting. Without the constant stimulation and demands of city life, my thoughts clarified, my energy renewed. I found myself sleeping better, moving more easily, thinking more creatively than I had in years. In mid-October, as promised, my friends Martha and Louise arrived for their visit, bringing laughter and news from the city. We explored the area together, discovering small towns and hidden coves I hadn't known existed, despite years of vacationing here. "You seem different," Martha observed one evening as we shared a bottle of wine by the fireplace. "More present somehow." "I feel different," I acknowledged. "More connected to myself, to what matters." "It suits you," Louise approved. "This whole arrangement, summers in Maine, winters with Rebecca, spring and fall in your own home. It's the best of all worlds." "I never would have considered it without the crisis forcing my hand," I admitted. Ironic that vitality's pressure led to a solution that truly enhances my vitality. After they left, a spectacular stretch of weather arrived, the legendary Indian summer of New England, with warm days and crisp nights. I spent hours in the small garden behind the cottage, clearing summer's debris and planting spring bulbs, an act of faith in future seasons. One particularly golden afternoon, as I knelt in the soft earth tucking tulip bulbs into their winter beds, I felt rather than heard a presence behind me. Turning, I was startled to see Rebecca standing at the garden gate, watching me with an unreadable expression. "Rebecca, I wasn't expecting you until the weekend." I rose, brushing soil from my hands. "I know," she said, stepping forward to embrace me. "I finished the project I was working on and decided to surprise you." She gestured to my gardening efforts. "Mom, you shouldn't be doing so much physical labor. Your arthritis is much improved with the coastal air and regular movement," I finished for her. "I'm not overdoing it, I promise. Just preparing for spring." She looked skeptical, but didn't argue. As we walked back to the cottage together, she asked, "Have you given any more thought to the winter arrangements? It's only a few weeks until we should close this place up." "I'm still planning to try your guest suite," I confirmed, "though I'm finding I love it here even more than I remembered. Part of me wishes the cottage was winterized." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "What if it could be?" she said finally. "Winterized, I mean." I looked at her in surprise. That would be a major renovation. New insulation, heating system, pipes that won't freeze. "I've been doing some research," she admitted. "And I spoke with a local contractor who specializes in converting seasonal properties to year-round use. He says it's definitely doable for this cottage." "But why would we?" I asked, puzzled by this sudden suggestion. "The plan was for me to spend winters with you." Rebecca hesitated, then led me to the porch chairs where we could sit facing the ocean. "I have something to tell you," she began, her expression nervous but excited. "I've made a decision that might change our arrangements." "What kind of decision?" I asked, a flicker of concern rising. "A good one, I think." She took a deep breath. "I'm adopting a child, a little girl. She's 4 years old and her name is Lily." For a moment I couldn't speak. The news was so unexpected. "You're becoming a mother?" I finally managed. Rebecca nodded, her face alight with a joy I hadn't seen in years. "I've been thinking about it for months, ever since our first visit here together. Something about reconnecting with family values, with what really matters. It made me realize what was missing in my life. But your career, the new position in Boston, is still happening," she assured me. "The company is incredibly supportive. They have excellent family leave policies and flexible work arrangements. And Lily needs a home, a family." Her voice softened. "She's been in foster care since she was 2. Her mother died of cancer, and there's no father in the picture." I reached for her hand, deeply moved. "Tell me more about her." Rebecca's face glowed as she described the little girl she was preparing to welcome into her life. "She's bright and resilient, despite everything she's been through. Artistic. She loves to draw and paint. Shy at first, but affectionate once. She trusts you. She squeezed my hand. She's going to need a grandmother, Mom. Tears sprang to my eyes at the unexpected gift being offered. Not just a granddaughter I had long ago stopped hoping for, but this new dimension of my daughter, this expression of her capacity for love and nurturing that had seemed buried beneath career ambition and divorce bitterness. When? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. When will she come home to you? The formal adoption will be finalized in December, just before Christmas, but she'll move in with me next month for the transition period. Rebecca looked at me earnestly. That's why I was asking about winterizing the cottage. I still want you with us this winter, more than ever with Lily joining our family. But I understand if having a child in the house changes your thinking about the arrangement. Of course I still want to come, I said immediately. I wouldn't miss this for the world. But winter in Boston with a 4-year-old adjusting to a new home. Perhaps having the cottage as an occasional retreat might be wise. For all of us. Rebecca nodded, understanding. That's what I was thinking. We could winterize just enough for short visits, a weekend getaway if things get overwhelming. And then next year, depending on how this winter goes, we could consider more extensive renovations for longer winter stays. We spent the evening planning, discussing the changes to Rebecca's apartment to accommodate Lily, the introduction strategy the adoption agency had recommended, the ways I could support them, both through the transition. I found myself energized rather than exhausted by these conversations, my mind filling with possibilities I had thought closed to me. You'll be a wonderful mother, I told Rebecca as we sat by the fire, the day's excitement giving way to quiet, contemplation. You have so much love to give. I learned from the best, she replied softly. And I want Lily to have what I had, a childhood rich in family connection, in values that matter, in the knowledge that she is deeply loved. Later, after Rebecca had gone to bed in the small second bedroom, I sat alone on the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the night chill. The stars blazed overhead, so much brighter here than in the city, and the rhythmic sound of waves washed away all lingering concerns. Life had taken an unexpected turn, opening doors I had thought permanently closed. A grandchild to love, a daughter rediscovering her capacity for nurturing, a newfound freedom to move between places and roles according to the season and need. None of it would have happened without the crisis. Without Rebecca's initial misguided attempt to claim my house, without Vitality's pressure campaign, without our stand against corporate intimidation. Out of conflict had come clarity, out of threat, opportunity, out of fear, a courage neither of us knew we possessed. As I finally rose to seek my bed, I whispered a quiet thanks to the night sky, for second chances, for unexpected gifts, for the wisdom to recognize that sometimes losing one home means finding another, broader definition of what home can be. Chapter 9, Full Circle. Winter in Boston with Rebecca and Lily proved both more challenging and more rewarding than I had anticipated. The child who arrived at Rebecca's apartment in November was solemn-eyed and watchful, her small face grave, beyond her years. She clutched a worn stuffed rabbit as she surveyed her new surroundings, saying little but observing everything. Give her time, the adoption counselor advised. She's experienced significant loss and disruption. Consistency and patience are key. Rebecca demonstrated depths of patience I hadn't known she possessed. Despite work pressures and the inevitable adjustment difficulties, she remained steady and loving, never pushing Lily for more than she could give, celebrating small victories, a spontaneous smile, a question asked, a moment of play unguarded by fear. My role evolved naturally into that of supportive grandmother, a gentle presence without expectations or demands. I read stories, taught simple card games, shared quiet activities like baking cookies or feeding birds on the balcony. Gradually, Lily began to relax in my company, sometimes choosing to sit beside me even when Rebecca was available. The guest suite Rebecca had prepared for me provided the perfect balance of connection and privacy. I could participate fully in family life, yet retreat when needed to process the day's emotions or simply rest my aging body, which found the energy of a 4-year-old both invigorating and exhausting. The winterized cottage became our weekend, sanctuary twice that winter, once in January when Lily's adjustment hit a rough patch, and again in March when we all needed respite from the confines of city living. The simple heating system the contractor had installed maintained basic comfort, though we still needed to bundle in sweaters and thick socks. "Cold," Lily pronounced on our first morning there, her breath visible in the bedroom air before the day's first fire had warmed the cottage. But her tone held wonder rather than complaint, and she delighted in the novelty of wearing mittens indoors. By spring, when we returned to my city house, the three of us had formed a cohesive family unit. Lily called me Grandma Martha now, the formal title gradually softening to Gamma in her everyday speech. Rebecca had settled into motherhood with growing confidence, her corporate sharpness balanced by a new gentleness, her schedule reorganized around Lily's needs without resentment. The city house, which had once seemed primarily mine, became our shared family base as the seasons turned. Rebecca enrolled Lily in a nearby preschool, and I found joy in the after-school hours we spent together in my garden, planting marigolds in the bed Harold had built decades earlier for another small daughter's hands. "Was my mom little like me once?" Lily asked one afternoon as we patted soil around seedlings. "Yes, she was," I said, treasuring this opening to share family history. She loved the garden too. Her favorite flowers were sunflowers because they grew taller than she. "Was?" Lily considered this, her small face serious. "My first mom liked flowers too. She had them in the hospital." These matter-of-fact references to her birth mother always touched me deeply. Rebecca and the adoption counselor had worked carefully to ensure Lily understood she had been deeply loved by the mother she lost, that her adoption was an extension of that love rather than a replacement. "Both your moms love you very much," I said simply,